For this card today, we're going to be using the Candy Christmas collection by Spellbinders. Specifically, I'll be working with the Gingerbread House and the Sweet Borders dies to create this card. This set is a lot of fun to play with. There's so many little intricate pieces that all work together to pull the card into one cohesive design. By the time we finish, you'll see it's not just a flat card. It's going to have dimension and layers and detail that make it really pop off the page. So let's stop talking about it and let's jump in. Hi, I'm Jeannie Scott. Welcome to the Upper Craft Room, where we make a mess and create something beautiful out of it. I already have the pieces cut out. I did that ahead of time so that you didn't have to sit and watch me crank out those die cuts. These sets come with so many small pieces, and while I love the detail, it can get confusing and overwhelming if you don't keep track of them. That's why I love these Spellbinder stackable trays. Now, I don't remember the exact ink colors off the top of my head. I think this one's Sea Glass and the other one is Passionate Pink. But I'll link everything below in the description so that you have the right names. For the background, I'm pulling out a falling snow stencil from Gina K Designs. I want to create a look of Snowfall behind the gingerbread house instead of just brushing ink. I'm doing an emboss resist technique. That way, the background will have color, but the snowflakes will stay crisp and white. To do this, I'm using Hero Art's white pigment ink and Satin Pearl embossing powder. I'm applying it with a Ranger foam dauber, not a brush, because a pigment ink is sticky. A brush won't get down into the stencil the way that the dauber will, so I'm really pressing that ink into the stencil so it grabs. And while I'm working on the stencil background, I'm also going to heat emboss the smaller pieces, the roof line, the chimney, the door, and the windows, so that they all have that snowy look layered from the very start. I'm really pressing that pigment ink into the stencil with the foam dauber so it settles into those little snowflakey snowfall openings. Pigment ink is a little bit thicker than dye ink, and it's almost, well, it is a sticky substance, like a sticky consistency. So brushing it lightly across the surface won't really do anything. You need pressure to get good solid coverage. One of the cool things about pigment ink is that it doesn't sink down into the paper. It just sits on top, which makes the colors look bold and creamy, almost like paint. That sticky texture is what lets embossing powder grab on so well. And here's the real advantage. Pigment ink stays wet for a lot longer. You don't have to rush. You can take your time, work across the stencil, or coat several small pieces before you heat them. That slow drying quality is what makes it perfect for embossing. So even though it's messy, it's worth it. And once the powder melts over the top, you get this raised dimensional finish that looks like a real icing on a gingerbread house. Now that everything's coated with pigment ink, I'm moving into the embossing powder. I like to cover all the pieces first before I start heating them. That way, I'm not picking up the tool, setting it down, and going back and forth a dozen times. It feels more efficient to get everything inked up first and then heat them all together. If you want a thicker, more dimensional look, you don't have to stop after the first melt. You can dip the piece back into the powder as long as you do it before the heated powder dries, and then heat it again. And keep repeating it until it's as thick as you want it. 2 or 3 passes will give you a really bold frosted effect. The look reminds me of decorated cookies. At first, the powder just looks chalky and rough, but the moment that heat gun hits it, it transforms into a smooth, glossy surface. It really does look like icing on a gingerbread house. And while I'm building up those snowy layers, I can't help but think about how strange it feels to be working on Christmas cards right now. Here in Missouri, it's that beautiful fall season. The leaves are changing and the air's cooling off, and I'm still trying to hold on to the last little bits of summer that I can. I can't say I'm completely into the Christmas spirit right now, but if I don't start now, they may not get done. Depending on how many cards you have to make or how many you're going to send out, it's going to take some time. So even though Christmas feels far off, this is how to stay ahead of it. For some reason, that last piece isn't holding powder. There's not a lot of powder on there to melt it, and that means it probably didn't get enough ink on it. So I'm going to ink that up again and set these other pieces aside. And while those pieces are setting up, I'm going to bring in one of the border pieces from the Sweet Borders dies. It technically is supposed to be a grounding layer, almost like a little candy frosting path or even a train track if you pair it with the other sets. But instead of using it that way, I decided to flip it upside down and turn it into a frosting sky above the gingerbread house. That's one of the things I love about these sets. They're designed to work a certain way, but if you just tilt a piece or use it in a different direction, it completely changes the look. And this one just made sense to me as a fluffy, snowy border across the top of the house. I'm treating it the same way I did the roof, the chimney, and all the other little pieces. After pressing the pigment ink into the two pieces, I got it coated really well. With pigment ink, you want to make sure that you've got enough ink down before you bring in the powder, because that sticky surface is what holds it in place. Then I'm dipping it into the powder, tapping the excess off, and hitting the heat gun, just like I did before. I'm building up those layers. I'll melt the first pass, dip it back in, and repeat 2 or 3 times until it's nice and thick. It really does feel like frosting a cookie. Now it's time to ink up the Snowfall background. For this, I'm using Passionate Pink and an extra large blending brush from Spellbinders. I love this brush because it covers so much surface so quickly. And when you're working on a full background like this, the smaller brushes just take forever and you end up with lines and uneven spots. The big brush lays down a soft, even coat in just a few passes. As I start blending, you'll notice it looks a little splotchy, but we don't have to worry about that because we're using Gina K inks. And Gina K inks always smooth out as they dry, so by the time the background sets, it looks completely even. That's one of the reasons that I reach for these inks again and again. They have that smoothing agent built right in, so you don't end up fighting those streaks or harsh edges. One of the inks is down, so I'll go back and I'll wipe off the snowflakes that we embossed earlier. It gives the background so much more depth and almost like a blizzard behind the gingerbread house. Now I'm moving into the gingerbread house and all the little pieces that bring it to life. For the base of the house, the door, and the chimney, I'm using chocolate brown ink. It gives it the perfect baked cookie look, just like a gingerbread fresh out of the oven. Like I was telling you earlier, instead of the traditional red and green, I like using colors that bring out contrast and keep the design feeling light. The sea glass has the cool tone that balances the warmth of the chocolate brown, almost like frosting against the cookie. Then, when you add Passionate Pink, it gives just enough brightness to make the details pop without taking over the whole card. For the little window, I use sea glass as the base, then color that little frame in Passionate Pink. That pop of pink against the aqua gives just such a fun contrast. It's small, but it makes the window stand out and keeps the design from looking flat. And by the way, I'm using the Ultinew sticky mat to hold my pieces in place. When I'm inking, I like to use the sticky mat because it keeps everything steady while I work, so the pieces don't shift or slide under my brush. It makes the whole process easier and a lot less frustrating. When I start blending, I don't expect the color to look smooth right away. The first layer almost always looks uneven and splotchy, but that's normal. As you build up the layers, the ink evens out and dries into a really nice smooth finish. That's another thing I love about working with ink instead of colored cardstock. Cardstock gives you that flat block of color, but with ink you can build it up and create more variation. The chimney can look a little darker than the door, or the edges can be richer than in the center. It gives that depth, and when the whole house comes together, those little differences really make it feel dimensional. Alright, now that those are done, I'm going to stop and clean up my mat with the Gina K Designs Tidy Towel. It's one of those little habits that saves me from making a mistake later. If I don't wipe things down in between colors, I almost always end up dragging brown or pink ink onto a piece that wasn't supposed to have it. And with all these tiny die cuts, you don't want to have to redo something just because of a stray smudge. Next, let's bring in the pieces for the sky. This is the layer that tucks under the frosted border we embossed earlier for the top of the card. I'm inking it up with sea glass, and it gives the prettiest soft backdrop. It frames the gingerbread house without overpowering it. The blue-green really makes the white frosting details pop, almost like a winter sky behind it. And the best part is when this piece goes above the house, it doesn't just look like snow. It creates a frame for the whole design, almost like the house is sitting under a snowy archway. Once that's blended evenly, I'll stop and clean the mat again. It may feel repetitive, but a quick wipe saves a lot of frustration down the road. It keeps stray ink from transferring onto pieces that are supposed to stay clean. Now I'm creating a matting layer to go behind the Snowfall gingerbread scene, and for this I'm using sea glass ink. At first I'm using a blending brush, and then I start using direct-to-paper swipes with the ink pad, but that can leave a bit of a wood grain texture, which in some instances can look cool, but not in this case. So I'm following up with the blending brush. It's softening out the lines and gives a smoother, even edge. Once the scene goes on top, you'll only see about 1/8 of an inch of this border peeking through, but that touch of color makes the whole card feel finished. All right, now it's time to start assembling the gingerbread house. First up, I'm gluing on the snow roof. This is the embossed white piece that really makes the whole house start to feel like a winter scene. Then I'm layering on the sea glass overlay, the one with the little cutouts that let the snow peek through. It's such a clever design, and once it's on there, it looks like the roof is piled high with frosting. I like to use the tweezers for these pieces because it makes placement so much easier. With my fingers out of the way, I can actually see the edges and line things up just right. Plus, it keeps me from smudging the glue where I don't want it. Having that extra control really helps when you're working with delicate pieces like this. Now for the door. This is where you might notice a little Easter egg. The door here is pink instead of brown, and if you look closely, you'll see my nail polish suddenly changes. Somewhere between takes, I even managed to lose a nail, so if you spotted that, good eye. That's what happens when you're juggling multiple projects and videos. Things don't always line up perfectly. Once the door's in place, I add the sea glass door frame. This one's a little fiddly because it's so thin. It takes a bit of patience to line up without bending it or shifting it out of place. But once it's finally down, it gives such a clean, crisp edge. Then comes the doorknob, which I inked in gold using my Martha Stewart gold ink pad. This is a very old ink pad, but it still works great. In fact, they don't even sell it anymore. But if you're looking for an alternative, Delcata gold ink works beautifully. Next, I glued on the bottom snow piece at the doorway. This one makes it look like a little drift of snow is sitting just right outside the house. Using it as snow softens up the doorway and makes the house feel more whimsical, almost like frosting spilling onto the doorstep. Once that's in place, I add the embossed door overlay. It's the snowy trim that goes over the top so the sea glass frame peeks through. It's a tiny detail, but it makes the doorway look frosted and finished. Now I'm adding the window frame, and just like the door, I topped it with the snowy embossed overlay. It's such a tiny piece, but I love the detail. It's those small layers that make the house feel dimensional and complete. Even though it's such a small part of the design, the window is one of the pieces your eye goes to right away. Adding that little overlay makes it sparkle just enough to feel special, like a gingerbread house you'd actually decorate for Christmas. Getting that lined up was a little tricky. Next time, I'll glue the frame to the snowy overlay first before gluing it down, and you get to learn from my mistake. And now it's on to the chimney, and yes, this time it's pink, another little Easter egg. Later in the video, it magically turns brown again, but for now, we're just going to enjoy the pink chimney moment. Even in pink, it adds so much personality to the house. The chimney makes the whole scene feel complete, and I finished it off with the embossed snowy cap, so it looks like the snow is collected on top that chimney. From here, off camera, because I forgot to hit record unfortunately, I glued the house onto the card, added the candy cane border, the sea glass mat behind the snowfall background, and the sea glass sky piece with the embossed snow tucked above the house. Finally, I finished it off by adding the sentiment across the top of the candy cane border. And this is where we're going to notice the last little Easter eggs. The chimney's back to brown, the window frame is pink instead of the sea glass, the doorknob is back to the sea glass instead of gold, and my nail polish is back to the original color from the start. That's the fun of filming over multiple days and stitching clips together. To me, it adds a little bit of character, but the important part is how the card turned out, and it's so sweet. All the little pieces came together, and it really looks like a frosted gingerbread house ready for Christmas. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this, make sure to hit the like so more crafters can find it. And don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell so that you don't miss another video. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.